Welcome to the latest edition of From the Horse's Mouth. I'm delighted to announce that today we have KK, who is the CEO of Ascendion, but a long-time industry heavyweight who I've known for several years, who's here to join me. And we're going to talk about, I think, a lot of 2025 and what happened and where we're going in 2026. Great to meet you in the podcast studio, Karthik. How are you doing?
Doing incredible, Phil. Yeah, we've known each other quite a while. I have to say congratulations to you on this incredible thing that you're building.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's a fun time to be in a small to medium-sized business where you can pivot and absorb what's going on around you and get ahead of what's going on in the markets. But I mean, this has been an incredible year, one of politics, process, and prediction, driven by, someone was describing it this morning as a joyless AI boom. But how would you describe 2025?
2025?
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm sort of a little schizo on the market at this point. I think the way I would think about 2025 from a market perspective is that it was the year of early stage opportunity. To me, it was the year where green shoots have really started to emerge on the agentic AI revolution in a very real way. And so if I thought about sort of 2024 as a year where it was all about agentic and AI for fun, the way I classify 2025 is the year of agentic at work. What is still open for conversation and debate is the whole notion of when do we get to agentic AI at scale? And we could spend the rest of the 1 hour talking about that, but that's sort of how I think about it. And the reason I believe that is because along with all the hype and the hoopla, the noise levels have also increased. And as you yourself being somebody that's trying to drive, disruption in the market, that if you don't have noise, the change is not enough. And so that's sort of how I think about 2025.
Yeah. Noise is important. That's what we try hard at HFS to, is to drive a narrative and have people take you seriously, be authentic in a market. And a market there, people care about influence and people care about advice. What do I do? One of the things which has impressed me, and we term this the AI velocity gap at HFS, but it's, as individuals, we've really empowered ourselves with AI. So we figured out how to connect our calendars, our scheduling, our Gmail and everything. We're allowed to experiment. We try things out. We're using all these different tools to do our jobs better, faster, slicker, smarter. I don't know anybody right now who isn't using ChatGPT or Claude or these tools to do their jobs. And I find it funny when you accidentally see someone screenshot during a call now and they're always sitting there on ChatGPT or something. But it's incredible how I think ultimately we're forces of nature. And if your job is under threat, you know it, right?
Yeah.
You know it. And you're forcing yourself to really figure this stuff out. Many people will do that, then go to work on a Monday morning and, oh my God, it's the same old crappy systems. Everything's in silos. Everything requires a committee. HR doesn't talk to finance, who doesn't talk to procurement, and marketing's over here and sales is over there. So my concern is that people are going to get pretty slick and focused, and they're going to look at their companies and turn around and think, why do I want to work here? This company's going to be toast in a year or two. So,
I agree with that because it's an interesting point that you bring out, right? Because on the personal side, I am my own leader. That's ultimately the difference between the personal and the professional side, right? I am my own leader. On the professional side, there's somebody else that's my leader. And so when I am my own leader, I get to define my set of values, my own set of ways of judging my journey on this. So I've decided to go use ChatGPT. The question I always think about, especially as leaders, is in the corporate context, what are leaders doing? Because there you are actually disconnecting between the doer and the leader. That's why, and I know, we talk about this quite a bit about the leadership debt that exists, the leadership crisis that exists during this time. It is incredibly important for very well-intentioned, purposeful, hands-on, lean-forward leadership now.
Yeah.
Leadership that is able to understand that trust is the new currency of artificial intelligence. If you are not able to create trust in the organization with the people that you believe will need to be part of this journey, then this thing doesn't get anywhere. And that's why I see this big difference between the personal. Why are we using it so much on the personal side and why are we struggling so much on the professional side? Because on the personal side, I am my own leader. On the professional side, I am not. I look for leadership. And when I look for leadership, if that leadership is not acting and behaving in the way that I want to behave, I'm always going to have that gap. And that I think is so important now for leaders in the industry, in every industry, to do. Until that gap gets closed at some level, the human transformation that needs to happen will not go at the speed that we need it to. And that's something that we think about a lot at Ascendion.
Right. Yeah. And when you look at leadership values, I don't think they've changed. I think it's about listening, admitting what you don't know, creating a safe space for your people to feel psychologically safe to express what they want to do, and then share their learnings with everybody. We have situations where staff is figuring really cool stuff out, and I know they're using AI, and I say, can you share this? What prompts did you write? This is an organization now where we need to start showing people how we're using these tools to make our jobs better. Because I think some people are kind of hiding it a little bit as well. I'm 10 times more productive than I used to be. I've got this ChatGPT seriously is getting to know me in a scary way. He knows how I think. It knows everything I've written in the last 2 years and just pulls some stuff all the time. It's fantastic. So I think if you're good at what you do, it can really empower you. But as a leader in this organization, I think it's embracing what's happening in our personal lives and try and bring it into what we're doing as a company, right? How do we sit down? We're all learning together. This isn't a question of I know better than you. This is a question of we're all learning. We're all getting smarter at this. We're all evolving. And I think you're right. Trust is everything, right? Yeah. Most stuff, people are scared. A lot of people are wired right now. They can see how they can be replaced. I did a podcast with this 26-year-old guy, Ed Elson, yesterday, who does a great profit markets thing in the mornings. And this is a very savvy kid who knows these technologies, knows the stock market, knows everything. He's giving a very different view of AI than I've been hearing from the adults in the room. Because I don't think leadership should be painting pretty pictures around this stuff. I think we need to be dead honest. And it's our responsibility to say to our staff, you need to get with this thing for your own sake, because you're going to be irrelevant in a couple of years if you don't. And it's having the tough conversations. And it's better to shout and scream at people than just having a sort of passive aggressive type relationship.
Yeah, no, we have to be very purposeful and very intentional about our leadership now. The ostrich strategy doesn't work. You can't just put your head in the sand and hope that everything blows over. It's not, because it's you that's getting blown over if you do. And so completely agree with you. Yeah. And that's why it's fun. This is a time for, you said this thing about small and medium-sized businesses, at least in the world that I live in. I think the only nuance I would add there is it's incredible to be a medium-sized business right now. Because I think when you serve enterprises look for impact and look for disruption, but at the same time, they look for a calming mind, a calming head. They look for somebody that they believe has dealt with enterprise complexities before. It's perfect to be a medium-sized company with a ton of intentionality around driving agentic transformation for clients. Because ultimately, what they're looking for, at least this has been our learned experience, Phil, is that ultimately what they're looking for is a partner that can help them reduce outcome risk. And somebody that's able to put forth a model through which they can reduce outcome risk. In that context, especially as you serve enterprises, being sort of the right size of scale, you don't have to be too big, because if you're too big, there's another word for it, we call them dinosaurs. But if you have to be just about the right size, where you can impact at an enterprise level, value, at the same time have sort of the speed and the flexibility and the willingness to learn to be able to change and adapt and move forward, right? And so I think being a medium-sized business is a perfect size to be, especially if you're serving enterprises.
Yeah, we're working with a number of, I'd say, more of the enterprise level clients. And I can think of two in particular who are very unhappy with their legacy relationships. They're stuck in these FTE type contracts, and they're hearing the leaderships of these providers wax lyrical about AI and all this sort of stuff. And they're saying, well, why aren't I getting any of this? Right. And at the same time, we're advising them and saying, well, maybe you should consider going out to market, doing a competitive bid, looking at some new partners who are going to work with you to invest in innovation and agentic and other solutions in your enterprise. And I see with some clients sheer terror of change. Like the thought of just saying, I don't want to work with you guys anymore. We're going to go and work with these guys. And it's this fear of change. I'm like, why are you're not scared to change your own habits of a lifetime and get ChatGPT to help you write your emails and do all sorts of things for you, but you're too scared to take a little risk that you're going to move infrastructure management from this company to this company and that sort of thing. So why is this fear of change so, I mean, I'm sure you're experiencing it with your own conversations, but, what do you think is going to happen to force clients to make the shift? Or do you think some are just not going to do it?
Listen, I think if you think about the force multiplier here, but back to your question, I think some may just not do it. That's the reality of human evolution, right? That's absolutely the reality of human evolution. But having said that, I think that those that end up doing it will end up doing it, I think, for the following reasons. At least that's what we're seeing, the ones that are actually getting it done. One is very, like I said, and I keep saying this, but very well-intentioned leadership in this direction. Leadership that I think is defined by optimism and courage, being relentlessly curious, and at the same time having a certain degree of empathy for what people are going through. That's where the trust factor becomes important. So it is a real challenge for leadership now to be able to be relentless and empathetic at the same time. And so I do believe that leadership that's able to show that over time would be able to scale this significantly. And there are many of those types of enterprise leaders that have been able to navigate through change in the market. So this will hopefully look like a forever increasing sine wave, right? But unless you conquer that problem, I think it's difficult to move to agentic AI at scale.
Yeah, I think it's conquering fear. Is we've been talking about automation taking jobs for years. I remember RPA in 2012, which we coined actually. There was the same conversation happening back then about what's going to happen when, I remember the huge numbers that came out to the market of how automation was going to impact organizations. And then it didn't happen. One, because the technology wasn't good enough and couldn't scale effectively. But also it was just lip service from CFOs and CIOs who would say, yeah, we're going to do automation, and they would dumb it down 2 or 3 depths below them in the organization. I feel now with agentic, I call it like the distant cousin of RPA, because the concept's the same. It's about autonomous capability. Most of what people are doing right now is Gen AI. Right? It's knowledge creation using LLMs and stuff like that. Agentic obviously has LLMs at the core, but it's genuine automation that can scale can be developed between people who have no tech skills versus people with tech development skills. So we are seeing this final revolution to, I think, real autonomous capability. And it's great if you're in a small company that doesn't have all the legacy behind you to do it, right?
Yeah.
But then we're at a point now where when we talked about layoffs 10, 20 years ago, it was always cyclical. Going through a cyclical time in the economy, we're going to shed some staff, we'll create jobs. Now what's happening is we're seeing jobs being eliminated that are never, ever going to come back. They're gone for good. That's the difference. And this is the first time I think our industry is facing this conundrum. And how do you see us coming to the other side here? Do you think we're just going to be a smaller industry in a couple of years? Or do you think there's going to be all sorts of opportunity created because of the stimulus of AI? How do you see this playing out?
I absolutely think that our industry is going to be much, much bigger than what it is right now. It won't look the same, though. And those that will not make the cut will be those that assume that it will remain the same. And my sort of two leading points on that hypothesis is this. One is we serve the mission ultimately of technology being more useful for humanity. That is what we are all consciously or subconsciously ultimately doing. And in an industry which is getting, in a world which is getting incrementally more dependent on technology every day, our industry is more relevant than ever before. And the way I define our industry is not as an on-site offshore industry, is not as an IT services industry. I define our industry as an industry that connects technology to outcomes. We are the last mile. We are the last mile industry in connecting technology to outcomes. So I absolutely think that in that sort of broader curve of technology being more and more relevant in the world, that is important. Then there's the second thing, which I always think about, right? And the analogy that I give is sort of the retail industry. If you think about the retail industry prior Amazon was massive. But the biggest part of that retail industry was the what would they call the unorganized retail or the home retail, right? Where if somebody wanted a bottle of milk, they wouldn't walk into a fancy store. They would just order it in the store around the corner, right? Now, I think our industry has the potential to start getting reshaped like how the retail industry started to get reshaped once Amazon came in, right? If you look at, for example, the top 15 companies in our industry, the services industry, whichever way you slice it, if you look at the cumulative market share, I think if I remember right, the last time I saw it was about 30-40% of what could be either a 1.5 or $2 trillion market as HFS defines it. Right? This is not an industry where the top players dominate 90% of the market with not much room to move further up. So if you think about a new value proposition where we are able to go in and we're basically breaking the linearity that exists between revenue and people by bringing forth platforms, getting a lot more IP-centric, starting to move towards a platform-based operating model with humans at the wheel, then you actually create a value proposition that is not just about taking share from each other. It's actually about going after that 60%. That's the opportunity that I get excited about. Over the next 10 years, in my mind, our industry can evolve to one where we are actually able to go very legitimately after the million people out there that ask for two people to help them. And that shift will happen if you have the right value proposition. So that's why, to me, this industry, if we embrace the new, can be an order of 6 to 7 times larger than what it is now.
So what do services firms need to do to grow and scale in this environment. I love this connecting technology to outcomes principle. I'm totally with you. But then I look at companies with hundreds of thousands of employees who are not doing that. They're running a process, they're running tasks, and they're charging for effort versus a complete flip of the model saying we need better talent so we can charge for outcomes.
Yeah.
How do we go about making that shift? This is the trillion-dollar question we've got to solve.
Look, I think we've got people to learn from, right? And we just have to look back to about 15 to 16 years. When the digital revolution happened, the digital revolution did not disrupt our industry. It created a revenue stream for our industry because there were other industries that got disrupted significantly, whether it be financial services, whether it be healthcare, whether it be retail. And there are leaders in the market that have been able to manage and innovate through that disruption. Look at JP Morgan. Look at Walmart. Look at a lot of these companies, which were massive companies that were still able to innovate, be very, very intentional about the innovation and move in that direction. What did they do? They started, in my mind, if I sort of step back and look at it, they started by taking a look at their leadership. They started to see what types of leaders should you have to bring in, right? It's garbage in, garbage out at the end of the day. So, you have to start to think about what types of leaders you need to start bringing in. If you've been hiring from the same old, stop doing that. Start looking at companies that are putting in place value propositions that are more akin to who we are, right? You start there. Then you start to lean forward on IP significantly. If you don't have a platform today, I don't think you should be in this business. I think you're much better off starting bagel shops. And I can tell you that bagels, everybody wants bagels, at least in New Jersey. And so I would start with leadership. Then I would go to product and IP. Then the third thing I would do is I would take a very, very hard look at your sales engine. If you have salespeople that cannot demo your platform in the first 15 minutes of a conversation with a client, then I think you would have a trust issue with the client. And I'll give you this example. I mean, I won't quote this, but one of my competitors who talks about the platform a lot in marketing and so on and so forth. I was talking to a client that told me this. They said that they wanted to understand their platform. And they said, hey, send me something about the platform. They send a PowerPoint presentation. Then the guy says, no, I want to know more about the platform. He sends another PowerPoint presentation. They did it 4 times. On the other hand, when my sales guy walks in with an iPad, with the demo that he shows of how the platform actually delivers outcomes, it starts there, right? So you have to start to rewire. And to me, the difference here is going to be culture. It's not going to be the technology. I can tell you one thing. This time around, like you said, on the automation time, it was different. This time around, you don't get to blame the technology. Because 8 of the top 10 most important companies in the world by market cap are making a massive bet on this. It's not going to be a technology problem.
No.
10 years back, only 2 of them did. This year, now, if you go back and look at the market cap, you will see that, right? If you look at the market cap of the last, I went back and looked at this during the big data revolution, 2010, 2011, 2012. If you take the top 10 market cap companies, only 2 or 3 of them made a public go forward bet on AI. You do the same thing right now, I think it's 8 or 9 out of the 10. And that tells you that this is not going to be a problem of investments in technology and technology moving fast. That's massive, as you know, AI infra capex that's going in. This is going to be about culture. This is going to be about leadership. This is going to be about how much are we leading with outcomes? How much are we talking about outcome acceleration versus, oh, look at all the fancy stuff I got. And that's what we really focus on. Right? We talk about 4 outcomes. We always talk about 4 outcomes. In the way that we go to market, we say, listen, we have a method that we call engineering to the power of AI, which helps you deliver on 4 meaningful outcomes: revenue acceleration, profit maximization, enhancing your experiences, keeping your CEO out of jail. These are the 4. And everything that we do, which is our engineering to the power of AI method, which involves 3 things, which is our platform, our AVAP platform, Our delivery playbook, which we have very carefully nuanced and built for multiple use cases and environments. This playbook is the core of the whole thing. And our people, our agentic delivery managers and Ascendion, agentified ascenders as we call them, all three of them coming together to work with clients to deliver on those 4 outcomes. That is, to me, it has to be about outcome acceleration.
Right. Well, I'm 100% with you on the fact that technology is not the problem. And our research has shown that, where I think it was, we asked the Global 2000, what's holding you back from achieving your goals, corporate objectives? It was process by a mile was the number one problem. And when we look at debts, I think we have tech debt at about 2 trillion and process debt's about 4 trillion. Total enterprise debt's 10 trillion. But what's the point in sizing debts if you're just sizing how screwed up everything is? I think you're absolutely right that we're going through a cultural revolution, a redesign of work revolution. And a lot of companies aren't going to make it through this because it requires a huge amount of change, a huge amount of effort. You've grown up like me, I think, in the services industry. You've come from a traditional background, and now you're in a feisty sort of mid-sized business. How do you guys make it over this hump? I think we're going over an 18-month cycle to get through the other side. How do you convince investors that this is the way forward? And are you even going to be called a services firm in a year? Is there any point calling yourself a services firm anymore?
Yeah. The last question that you brought up, and I'll talk about that, that's something that we think about almost all the time. I genuinely like the terminology that HFS has come up with, services as software. I think it's a great terminology. Ultimately, if we are in service of a human outcome, then the word service becomes critical in whatever shape and form we become. But the entire method is changing. And so what we decide to call ourselves, I think that is an important decision point that we have to make. We have to make the call on whether we want to make that name about the outcome of what we're delivering or about the method in which we deliver. If it's going to be about the method in which we deliver, the term doesn't become relevant anymore. If it's about the outcome of what we're delivering, then it starts to become more relevant, right? Because I also do not believe that this phase of this world is going to be just about pushing licenses. So it won't just be about pushing licenses. It'll be about a new category that gets created. It will absolutely be about a new category that gets created. But I am staying away, honestly, from trying to call us something right now. And I'm allowing the outcomes to dictate sort of that journey for us. So when we go in, and for some of the deals that we're winning, and very soon we'll talk about some of these, and these are like multi-$100 deals, multi-$100 million deals. Thank you, not just multi-100 deals. Multi-$100 million deals with Fortune 100 companies, helping them transform the way that they build software so that they can deliver much more accelerated and exponentialized outcomes. As those stories start to happen, Phil, I do believe the investors will get in line. But I also do believe that in the investor world and sort of the more classically defined private equity world, I think there is an important question to be asked about how do you define success? How do you define excellence? What metrics do you use? Right? For example, I don't think headcount is relevant anymore. We talked about small, medium, large businesses, but how do you define those? You define those in terms of revenue and headcount. But why should headcount be relevant anymore in this new world? Those types of questions, I think, are very relevant questions that investors sort of need to go through. I know HFS, for example, you've been talking a lot about revenue per FTE and operating margin per FTE. As an industry, we have not thought about that. We've not really put a massive focus on operating margin per FTE, which I think is a very, very relevant metric to take a look at.
Yeah.
And so now in the investor community, I think there are two things that become very relevant. And this is where I think as leaders, we have the opportunity to drive education, which is to say, listen, these are the outcomes. And therefore, you can trust us. And these deals are happening, and these genuine sort of inflection points are happening. And the proof of those coming to life lies in these types of metrics, right? Not just in looking at scale, but really in looking at output to input ratios, right? And that's really how you do it. I think another part of this also from an investor perspective, my experience is that I think investors think a lot about not just anymore, I mean, at least in my experience, not just about the broader business case, but about what's your starting point. And by that, again, I come back to what types of leaders do you have? What type of IP investments are you making? What is your secret sauce? I get asked this question every day. What is your secret sauce? Like, how do you know that the platform that you're building will not be upstaged by a Bay Area startup, 12 months from now? So we keep getting asked that question. And so those are the types of things that I think we need to be able to answer very well for us to be able to get investors on board. And there are some that are getting on board now. Many that are getting on board, actually.
When you look at bringing on, you talk a lot about your leadership, your talent, you recognize that's where you need to see the shift. I look at a lot of your competitors and I don't see a lot of leadership who are any different from the same people from 10 years ago. They're still selling the same way. They think the same way. They're trying to talk big games with PowerPoint. They're not actually getting their hands dirty. And clients aren't stupid. They can tell who's getting their hands dirty and who is not. So when you're looking at that next wave of talent to take your company to the next place, what are you looking for in people now? Are you looking for a completely different profile? Are you looking for people who've had 20 years in services, or is it a very different mindset?
Well, I think it's a very, very important question, because I think that ultimately there are roles that are played in front of clients where some things remain the same and some things need to change. And I'll tell you what needs to remain the same. Our ability to be able to make the client problem our problem is still the same. The need for us to continue to be flexible and mindful and thoughtful about the challenges, the inherent complexities and challenges that lie in our client's environment is still the same. You can't be somebody that walks in and says, "Hey, listen, I don't really care about what you got, but this is what my product does." That I don't think will work in today's world, especially when what you're doing has become so impactful and so important for the client. So that is still the same. Now, those are all some very fundamental traits that we have had in the tech services industry, because we're all wired with the services mindset of we're in service of someone. So I think those types of skills are very relevant. But at the same time, the skills that I believe aren't necessarily new, but are also one needs to be thinking about a lot more, is technical hands-onness. You have to be very comfortable as a leader building an agent very quickly. And I'm not talking about deep technology complexity. I'm just talking about somebody that's not used to sitting in a room with four walls and barking out orders, right? Someone that's actually building agents for themselves, showing that you can lead from the front. I think that technological comfort is incredibly important. The second piece of this is commercialism. How do you actually commercialize the whole thing? There is so much you can learn from the product industry around how you start to commercialize and create solutions here that work for clients in a commercial construct that makes a ton of sense for them. That, I think, is skill sets that you need to start to think about. So where, some of the areas that we are starting to look at, I will tell you broadly some of the areas that we're starting to look at. Product industry for one, especially in terms of go-to-market and sales orientation. The product industry, again, for us to be able to strengthen the productization of our platforms, right? For too long, the services industry has built platforms as just sort of an afterthought that emerged from a bunch of very intention client conversations. But we need to productize our platforms a lot more, and we invest significantly in hiring from there. Then the third thing is we have to look at non-traditional markets. I look very deeply at the movie industry. And the reason I do this is because storytelling is at the core of our ability to be able to communicate outcomes, right? So we need to have more storytellers and story writers and storytellers. So I think, I've been researching that, and we've actually looked at a couple of people that can help us on that space. So that's, I think, an industry that we start to look at more seriously now than ever before, given the importance of storytelling in our market, connecting outcomes to technology, simplifying it, telling the story right, I think is incredibly important. Yeah, I would say these are some of the industries that I would really start to push on from a people standpoint.
Yeah, terrific. I also value learnability a lot. So people who can learn on the job, start to build curiosity and learn new things and new skills. To me, that's the core. And what frustrates me most is when I have staff who won't learn new things. Like, honestly, I go to my finance people. They should be using the latest, they should be looking at the latest expense management tools. How do you make this easy for people? Same with marketing and agentic capabilities and campaign management. You can go through everything. Everybody in the company should be using and exploring advances in the technologies that are driving their function forward. Because then you can have marketing and sales sit down and think, hey guys, we're all trying to do the same thing here. We're trying to productize for our clients. We're trying to delight them. We need better data. We need to be on top of this. Just getting people out of this process mindset into this learning mindset. And then it's a huge challenge for leadership to do, but I think it means you need to spend more time bringing your people together. I think this was Steve Jobs' great big thing, was he would bring his leadership team together once a week and they would just thrash out how they work together more effectively to achieve the goals. And I don't think enough companies have that mindset. It's especially true in our industry where it's one way, everything is tick the box. Marketing does it this way, sales does it this way, delivery does it this way. And it's until we sort of break down these silos and start bringing everyone back together, like what problem are we trying to solve and how do we do this together? And do we have the right people to deliver against that? We're never gonna get anywhere in the next couple of years. So
Agreed.
Yeah.
And it's exciting though. The exciting part of that is the opportunity for us to be able to make a massive impact.
You are so right. I was just thinking back during pandemic. I remember, like, as an analyst, it was like, if I could just write one interesting thing a month, that will keep me going, right? Because it was just, we were just trying to survive. Now it's like, I've got about 20 things on the go. There's something interesting to talk about every day. What is happening right now is beyond comprehension of change, of opportunity, of overcoming fears and everything. This is an incredible moment of change. And I think if you're good at what you do, these technologies can make you great at what you do. And I tell my staff, it's like, if you're going to use AI to help you with your research, write your research first and then see what AI can do to improve it. Don't ever ask the AI to write your research for you. It's as simple as that.
It's very, very true. I think we go back to talking about the change and so on and so forth. One real area that I think services companies have to take a hard look at is capital allocation models. We have to learn from the product industry on how to do smart, meaningful capital allocation. Traditionally, we've not been a CapEx intensive industry. Our CapEx has been around buildings and infrastructure and so on and so forth, right? Network equipment and things like that. But it is incredibly important for us to be able to understand how to do very meaningful capital allocation and think about long versus short in a very real manner. And that's where I think, when you talk about new skills, the need for a new form of leadership, all of that becomes so relevant. That conversation becomes so relevant because, for many, many years as an industry, we never really worried about any type of non-infrastructure related capital that needed to go beyond 1 or 2 years. Never had to worry about it. It was always about the OpEx. I spend a lot more thinking about what's below the line now from an EBITDA line than what's above the line. I spend a lot more time about where that thing is going.
Yep.
Way more time on it. Think a lot harder about account receivables, because you need that cash for you to be able to do capital allocation very effectively in the larger scheme of things. So things that we just sort of thought were the responsibilities of CFOs to just drive good quality operating excellence has now become even more mission critical for you, because you need to think about where your capital is going with much more meaningfulness. It's not just something that only the CEO of a $15 billion company needs to worry about. Medium-sized companies and CEOs and leadership teams need to worry about this significantly, because there used to be a time when what it meant for you to go from S to M and from M to slightly oversized M, I mean small, medium to slightly oversized M, was just to keep responding to the client's needs for people. That's not the case anymore. Clearly not the case anymore. I mean, if you look at my sales channel, 87% of my deals are proactive. 87%. 87% of the time, you're not hitting competition till 6 months, 7 months into the deal shaping process.
Yeah.
Right? And so for you to be able to do those types of things, the way you think about capital is very, very different.
Yeah.
I think that is something that CEOs of services companies, of leaders in services companies need to really start to think about with much more intention and purpose.
Yeah, when you look at how much services firms invest in R&D, it's pathetic. I worked on a major deal recently, and I was shocked at the tiny sums of money being put aside for innovation funds for $100 billion clients. It was insane. And then you actually look at the product companies, and they put huge proportions of their profits and income back into R&D. Service firms don't do that. They're giving it all back to the shareholders. It's just a cash slop, machine. That's why, if that's all you're going to do, you're on an erosion. You're on a journey like many legacy services firms have been on, where it's they celebrate shrinking profitably every year.
Celebrate. That's a good one.
I'm not going to name names. But there you go. I read about one recently. You probably know about. And,
yeah.
I gotta go. Hey, look, this has been fantastic. We can continue this for another hour or two, and I look forward to meeting up with you in person again soon. Tremendous fun. Really enjoyed the conversation and sharing this with the world very, very quickly. So thank you for your time today.
Of course. Super exciting to have had this chat with you, Phil. It's an incredibly exciting time to be in an industry which is going through so much change. People used to say, somebody said this, everybody loves progress, nobody likes change. This is one where the responsibility of making people get on board with it really sort of lies with people like us. And that's, I think, the most exciting part.
I've never had so much fun, honestly. And a couple of years ago, it's sort of like, how do I make enough money to just call it a day, sit on a boat somewhere? And now I'm just like, all right, I'm very excited about the next 5, 6, 7 years of this industry and where this is going. And being at the core is it's a privileged place to be.
Thanks for tuning in to From the Horse's Mouth, intrepid conversations with Phil Fersht. Remember to follow Phil on LinkedIn and subscribe and like on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite platform for no-nonsense takes on the intricate dance between technology, business, and ideological systems. Got something to add to the discussion? Let's have it. Drop us a line at fromthehorsesmouth@hfsresearch.com or connect with Phil on LinkedIn.